This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to false views. The pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, very good. There you are, that's the marvelous Metta Sutta. And it's a powerful sutta. It's not just about metta. I think it's about the whole path, actually. Metta and kindness and meditation and wisdom and everything is included in that sutta. So metta is kind of the culmination of all of these qualities. So it's extraordinary. Yeah. So should I just talk then? Is that right? Catherine? Okay, I will just talk then. Okay, good. So I'll just talk. So the Metta Sutta kind of shows us, is one, basically the teaching of the Buddha. And for that reason, it is, I consider it very, very important, because all the Buddhism goes back to the time of the Buddha, goes back to what the Buddha taught us. And all of the Dhamma is really meaningful only insofar as it relates to the word of the Buddha. The word of the Buddha is the foundation for everything. And this is kind of really important. And it's something that we very often forget in Buddhism. And I will give you an example of that kind of forgetfulness, because I recently came back from Vietnam. I was in Ho Chi Minh City in the south of Vietnam. I was part of the United Nations Day of Vesak in Ho Chi Minh City. And very large gathering at one of the universities, a Buddhist university of Vietnam. And 3,000 people were there, over 1,000 people from around the world, from all corners of the world. I think there was from every continent, from Africa, from North America, from Europe, from all over Asia, from Australia. Australia was also represented. I have the pleasure of being able to say that. And I think the only place that was not represented was Antarctica. I think they were still left out. But it was probably hard to get representatives from Antarctica, so I can sort of see why they weren't there. So Antarctica was kind of missing out, but otherwise I think there were people from pretty much everywhere around the world. And it's nice to be able to meet fellow Buddhists from different traditions, from the Mahayana, from the Vajrayana, from Pure Land Buddhism, from everything. Yeah, every country pretty much. 80 different countries were represented there. And so we all came together, and that was kind of beautiful. And then Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, the kind of well-known American monk who has translated pretty much all the suttas, he gave the keynote address. And he gave a very powerful address. I was very proud of him when I heard him speak, because one of the things that he said was that all of you who are the leaders of Buddhism, who are present here today, every one of you should ensure that there is an ordination of women, there is bhikkhuni ordination of women in your tradition. And I thought, wow, it's amazing. This is one of the leading gatherings of the leaders of Buddhism around the world. And here it has the guts to say that to this gathering. I thought, wow, good on you for doing that. What a marvelous thing that is. And I guess he has nothing much to lose, so he can actually be a bit controversial. He can speak truth to power, as the old saying goes. And that's basically what he did. And I was really, the entire trip to Vietnam was worth it just for hearing him say that. I thought that was really, really, really nice. And of course, that fits in very much with what we're trying to do here at the Buddhist Society of WA. So afterwards, I congratulated him on kind of giving such a nice speech, because I know him a little bit from before. So that was marvelous. That was kind of, for me, the highlight of, of this whole thing. But then later on, there was also, the 3,000 delegates were divided up into different groups. And then there was talks and presentations given in different auditoriums around this university. And so it was divided up, so you can only go to 1 out of 10 talks, because there was 10 different auditoriums where things were being presented. And so I went to the one, because I was also making a presentation, I went to the one where the same theme was presented as the theme that I was giving. And that was the theme of how to create, from inner peace, how to create outer peace. Starting from inner peace, how that leads to outer peace in the world. And it's a nice topic. The overall theme for the whole conference was unity and inclusivity, from a Buddhist perspective, which is always a very nice idea, the idea of harmony and how to work together and all of these kind of things. And this particular theme where I was involved with was a sub-theme, how to create outer peace from inner peace. And so I listened to all of these talks. And I have to admit, I was kind of disappointed. And first of all, most of the presenters there were academics. These were professors, from various universities. And some of them are very, very nice people. And I really enjoyed having a chat with them. And, they were really good people. Buddhists from every corner of the world, pretty much. But when they presented the Dhamma, they presented it in a way that, to my mind, this is supposed to be a Vesak celebration. It's supposed to be inspiring. And then to get an academic that presents an academic talk with slides and with kind of reading from a manuscript or whatever, it doesn't have the same power. It doesn't have that inspirational power that a Vesak celebration should have. And so I missed the inspirational side of a Dhamma talk. And when a Dhamma talk is well given, when you hear someone like Ajahn Brahmali and he's kind of really holding forth in a powerful way, I find it really inspiring just to sit in the audience and listening to the Ajahn Brahmali. There's a power not just in the words, but in how the words are given, how they come out, where they are coming from. This is often far more important than actually the words themselves. And this is what a good Dhamma talk should really be about. It should inspire you. It should lift you up. It should make you feel different at the end of the talk from when you started out. But these talks were just too dry. And so I wanted to go to the organizers, these really big shot monks, and want to tell them and say, please, in the future, bring some more inspirational teachers, because that's what Vesak should be about. And if I have the opportunity to be very cheeky, I might actually do that, because I'm not all that afraid of these senior monks, I'm quite happy to tell them what, what I think is a good idea. So I may very well do that if I have the opportunity. So that was the first thing that was kind of, I thought was not quite right. The Dhamma needs to be inspirational, because it is from inspiration that meditation arises, that the whole path really is built upon that. But the second thing that kind of was very clear to me, especially now we're just chanting the Metta Sutta, which seems to be the word of the Buddha, was that nobody was mentioning the word of the Buddha. Yeah, no one mentioned any suttas. They were all about, when you practice mindfulness, then you become peaceful, and then when you kind of go into the world, then the world becomes a better place. Or if you are mindful in your daily interactions with people, or if you are mindful when you study, you become a better student, or if you're mindful at work, and we have measured mindfulness in this way, we can show through brain waves measurements that mindfulness works. It was all this kind of stuff. It was all modern stuff. There was no reference to how the Buddha talks about these things at all. It's all about what we're doing now, what universities are doing. There was no one even said that mindfulness actually comes from Buddhism originally. This is actually where all of these teachings are derived from. All this research ultimately is derived from the suttas and the word of the Buddha. The people who started the mindfulness movement, especially in the United States, because that is where it has taken off, John Kabat-Zinn and these people, mindfulness-based stress reduction and these things, they drew their inspiration from the Dhamma and then decided to divest it of what they considered religion so that only the pure mindfulness remained. But that is a problem, because there is no such thing as pure mindfulness. Yeah, this is a wrong understanding of how the Dhamma works. Everything on this Noble Eightfold Path is interconnected. You can't take one factor out and think that there is such a thing as pure mindfulness. And so that was, to me, that was concerning. And what was concerning is that, it's taken out of the sutta context, and then all of these ideas that come from America, from the United States, because of the hegemony of American culture around the world, it means that even these nations that are, where everyone is a Buddhist, they take these American ideas back to their countries, and now they present the Dhamma just like Americans do. And I thought, we are losing something in this. We can't all become like John Kabat-Zinn and have mindfulness-based stress reduction. We are losing something very important here. And so I felt that kind of, we are actually, we need that plurality in Buddhism, whereby we do different things. And those who come from Buddhist countries, they have the right to present the Dhamma in the way that is more connected to their culture, rather than taking on board all of these Western ideas, especially American ideas, because American culture is so hegemonic and so strong everywhere around the world, basically. So that was kind of my gripe. I wasn't upset at this, because I know this is just the way people are, but it occurred to me that we need to do something else. And so what I did then, I also gave a presentation, and my presentation was quite different from all the other ones. And what I said, all of these other ones was about how mindfulness creates a better life, how it creates a better society, and all of these kind of things. But I said that actually, this is all well and good. I have no problem with any of these things. These are positive contributions, obviously. But that is not how the Buddha talks about mindfulness in the suttas. It's a very different thing here. Mindfulness in the suttas is not really aimed at creating a better world. Mindfulness in the suttas is not really aimed at kind of some, perfect life, and now we can go out and kind of enjoy ourselves because we are mindful in our relationships or mindful at work. That is not really the purpose of mindfulness in Buddhism. It is far more profound than that. And if we don't use the suttas as our reference point, we lose the profundity of the Dhamma, what it really is about. And that is really problematic, because then we lose the essence of Buddhism. We lose this gift that we have for the world as Buddhists, that kind of goes by the wayside, because we are kind of too much staying with the zeitgeist and not actually being sufficiently, using the suttas in the right way. And so when I gave my presentation, I started in a very different way here. And I said, well, what does the Buddha have to say about conflict and disharmony. Yeah, because this conference was all about unity and inclusiveness. So what does the Buddha have to say about unity and inclusiveness and the opposite, which is disharmony and conflict and war and these kind of things? And I said that, well, what the Buddha said is actually that conflict and disharmony is an integral part of human society. Yeah, from the Buddha's point of view, there is no final solution in society. There is no utopian world in which everything is fine. Yes, we can maybe create a better society if we choose our governments wisely, yeah, but that seems also to be very difficult to choose our governments wisely. You look at what's happening around the world, there's all kinds of things seem to be going in reverse sometimes, and we just don't know what's going on. Actually, all of these things are so uncertain. And so I pointed everyone to the sutta called the Sakapanya Sutta, a very interesting sutta found in the long discourses of the Buddha, the Digha Nikaya, number 21, the questions of Sakka. So Sakka is the Lord of the gods. So I don't know if Sakka actually asked the Buddha these questions, but that's kind of how it is set up in this sutta. And so Sakka comes down to the Buddha, and he asked the Buddha this really remarkable question. And I've always wondered, why haven't more people in the world actually asked this question? Because it's kind of very, very much to the point. And the questions he asked the Buddha, he says that, well, why is it that when everyone in the world wants harmony, wants freedom from conflict, wants peace, wants to work together, wants unity, when everybody wants this, why is it that we still have conflict, we have disharmony, we have violence, we have wars in the world? When what we want is the opposite, why do we get the opposite of what we want? It's a really good question. You would think that if we really wanted that, we would be able to do it, right? So something is out of whack here. And this is what he says to the Buddha. And then the Buddha replies, and he has this long list of cause and conditions, kind of taking this back stage by stage. So one of the cause and conditions in this long list is desires and aversion. Yeah, we have desire and aversions for things, and this is one of the reasons why we have conflict, for obvious reasons. If you have a lot of aversion, you reject things, and if you have a lot of desire, you want to accumulate more for yourself, and then we get into conflict. It kind of makes very good sense. But then he analyzes this further, and it takes it back stage by stage, going backwards to the root cause of conflict. Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, because he says that the root cause of conflict and disharmony and problems in the world is what he calls papancha. And papancha is this, actually the full compound is papancha sanya sanka. And this means basically perceptions and ideas based on the proliferation of the mind that always goes out and proliferates and makes things out of nothing, basically. And in the suttas, this whole idea of papancha is rooted in one thing, and that one thing is the sense of self. So the sense of self is the root cause of conflict in the world. Yeah, and that has very, very powerful implications, because what that means is that there's always going to be people with a sense of self in the world. You're not going to be able to eradicate the sense of self from all beings in the world. That's impossible. It's hard enough to do it yourself, right? You have probably all tried to kind of reduce the sense of self. You know how difficult it is. Yeah, so I often like to ask how many arahants are present, and usually not so many. Yeah, so that kind of gives you the idea of how hard it is. So it is really hard. And so we cannot expect that in our society. And because we can't expect that, and because it will never happen, that's basically the truth, it means that there is no such thing as a society where there is no conflict, where there is no disharmony, where there is no violence, even where there is no war. This is hardwired, baked into our societies because of our defilements, because of our sense of self. That is very interesting already in its own right. And it is very interesting because it means that the idea looking for a utopian society, as we often do as human beings. We have tried utopian experiments around the world, and usually with disastrous consequences, killing millions of people. We know what happened in Cambodia with the killing fields and Pol Pot and all of that. It was terrible. And there's many other examples of that in history of the world, of ideology and utopian ideas getting in the way of kind of reality. So Buddhism says, actually, that's impossible, and that's already a very, very useful insight. So this is kind of the starting point. That's already useful. The other kind of very powerful insight coming from this is that there is a limit to how much effort we should make in trying to kind of create an external world that is perfect. Yeah, if it is impossible, and if we know that violence is always going to come back, we start to change our values. Instead of putting all our values in what the world is like, instead of trying to correct the world in all kinds of ways, we start to understand the power of the spiritual path, because it is on the spiritual path where we can overcome the sense of self. That's kind of the idea of the spiritual path from a Buddhist perspective. And so suddenly the spiritual path becomes incredibly important, because that is where we can achieve the thing that the Buddha is talking about. And of course, if you then are able to overcome the sense of self, at least to some extent in your own personal life, that will then also express itself outwardly in the world outside. And so by living the spiritual life in the right way, by reducing or even overcoming the sense of self, not only are we personally becoming peaceful, but we're also kind of allowing that to go into the world. That is the consequence of that. And maybe I'll come back to that in a second to talk more about that. So this, to me, is the right way of thinking about this. This is kind of the Buddha's insight into the nature of the world. And at a large conference like in Vietnam, I think we don't have to only talk about these things, but at least they should be mentioned. So I'm very glad I was there because I mentioned it. So that's what happened. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to kind of balance things out a little bit. So I was very pleased with that. But there was another place in the suttas where the Buddha also talks about the problem with the world, and how this, why it is impossible to have a world that is always in harmony and which always is peaceful. And that is a simile that I kind of often use in my Dhamma talks. And this is a simile of the birds and the piece of meat. Some of you have probably heard this simile before because I talk about it quite a lot. And this is the idea that, if a bird gets hold of a piece of meat, a piece of meat is very valuable in the bird kingdom because usually they have to eat insects or whatever, whatever they eat. But if it gets a piece of meat, it's like, yay, I got a piece of meat. Hooray, so happy. So it grabs onto this piece of meat, takes it with a beak or whatever and flies off. But of course, because the piece of meat is so valuable in the bird world, it means other birds also want the same piece of meat. And so as soon as this first bird gets hold of that piece of meat and it flies off, all these other birds, bigger ones like hawks and, eagles or whatever, they fly after it and they try to rip that piece of meat out of that other bird's claws or beak or whatever it is. And so what happens then? Well, what happens then if that first bird, if it doesn't let go of that piece of meat, then, of course, it will end up very disastrous for that bird. Maybe it will die, or maybe it will get hurt very badly, or who knows what. But disaster is kind of waiting here. And so this is the idea here, is that the piece of meat is a symbol for the external world. Especially it is a symbol of all the things that we have in common in the world. The idea that we are sharing basically the external world. We are sharing all the same kind of resources, and we often want the same things in the world. We want the same promotions. We want the same houses. We want the same cars. Everyone wants the best stuff in the world. We want the same partners. That is a really big one. We are fighting over kind of the partners or whatever, and that is one that causes enormous conflict in the world. And so the idea here is that we share the external world. We share the sensory world, if you like. And because we share it, there's always going to be competition. And because there's going to be competition, there's going to be winners and losers. And because there's winners and losers, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be violence, even going to be war. Sometimes we go to war over resources. That's kind of a well-known phenomenon in the world. And so you can see again, this is very similar to the previous idea. The idea that the conflict is inherent to our society. We can't avoid conflict because we have the external world in common, and because we want the same things, guaranteed there's going to be conflict. So this is the starting point for this whole thing. And so what we have to do then, we have to reduce the sense of self, and if we can, and we also have to let go a little bit, not hold on so hard to the things in the world. We have to reorient our values, move our values more onto the spiritual life and a little bit away from the worldly things, because the worldly things are obviously problematic. So the question then is, well, how do we do that? What is the right way of doing this? And you might think, just having heard now the simile of the piece of the bird and the piece of meat, you might think, well, we all have to let go of the meat. Are you ready to let go of the meat? Probably not. Yeah, it's hard to let go of the meat, because the meat is everything we've got in our lives. The meat is our house. The meat is our dearest belongings. The meat is our relationships. That's the meat. So it's very, very hard to let go of that meat. And so it's a very high demand from the Buddha when he kind of uses this kind of simile. So what can we do? Well, the first thing that we can do, and this is of course, what the Buddha says when he talks in the variety of suttas, he talks about meditation practice. He says that we should be atta-dipa and dhamma-dipa. We should take our refuge in ourselves, and we should take the Dhamma as our refuge. We should be an island unto ourselves. Dipa means island. And that happens through meditation practice. And this is one reason we have the International Armadale Group. Is that an oxymoron, Catherine? International Armadale Group? I think it's an oxymoron. I think it's kind of a contradiction in terms of... Anyway, it's a kind of cute term, the International Armadale Group. So we'll call it that. So this is why we have this group, is because we are actually trying to fulfill that very idea in the Dhamma, the idea of making yourself into an island, making an island out of the Dhamma. To kind of withdraw from the world, because meditation is precisely that. When you close your eyes and you go inward, the idea there is to let go of the world and find a refuge within. That refuge within, if it really works, is a refuge of peace. It may be a refuge of joy. It's a refuge of freedom that you find inside of yourself. And the deeper your meditation is, the more powerful that refuge is. And you actually start to gain an independence from the world outside. And you are letting go of that piece of meat. The piece of meat actually doesn't matter so much anymore. You understand, you gain a kind of resilience in the face of all the problems in the world, in the face of all the change that happens in everyone's life. And because of that resilience, you're able to deal with the problems of life even better because of that. But you may think that that kind of meditation is really hard. How can we kind of get to that point in meditation? Because actually, it is not always easy to gain access to all of the profound peace in meditation. Some of you may do that. Some of you may have really good meditations, and that's wonderful if you can, but some of you are probably also struggling a little bit more. And so we need something more than just meditation practice. And we need kind of the earlier steps and the other steps of the path. And what is nice about these other steps of the path is that they too lead to a kind of refuge from the world. They too lead to a reduction in the sense of self. They too lead to a releasing of the piece of meat a little bit. And one example of that is an act of generosity. Generosity is a very, very important part of the Buddhist path. And I would really recommend all of you, if you can, to get into the idea of generosity in various kind of ways. Make that an integral part of your life. Wherever it is, do it often. Be generous, not just kind of once in a while, but do it often, do it every day. Small little acts of kindness, small little acts of kind of helping and doing something positive for someone else without expecting anything in return. Be generous to strangers, because if you're generous to strangers, there is no expectation of anything in return. And there's something very powerful about generosity. the idea of generosity is very closely linked to the idea of non-self. Yeah, generosity and non-self are very closely linked to each other. And often I don't think we fully appreciate that. Because when you give something, remember the things that are yours. They are really an extension of your sense of self. The sense of self wants to own things, because when the sense of self owns things, it feels safe. It feels it can enjoy pleasures in the world. That's why we have relationships. That's why we have houses. That's why we have possessions. And we always think of these things as mine. These are my things. It's a sense of self extending into the world, grasping onto things in the world. So when you are being generous, when you are giving something which truly is yours, you are doing the opposite of holding on to things in the world. You are doing an anti-self movement. Yeah, you're letting go of your sense of self. And if you notice, please notice what happens when you are truly generous. When you truly let go of something, when you truly give something to someone else, notice what happens there. Because actually, what you will feel, if it is a strong movement of generosity, you feel a sense of release. You feel a sense of freedom. And that freedom, part of that freedom, is the release from the sense of self that you're feeling right at that moment. Because the sense of self is confining. The sense of self makes you small. It makes you kind of, this is my space and the world outside is dangerous. But at that moment, you're opening up to the world, reducing that feeling of confinement and limitations that you may have inside of yourself. So this is actually a way of overcoming the sense of self, simply by being generous. So it's very powerful. You have very, very simple things that are very, very powerful. And that's why we should be generous all the time if we can. I really recommend this to you. It's small acts. Yeah, bring one of your colleagues a cup of tea or a glass of water, and how can I help you today? Or whatever it is. Yeah, little things like that. Don't be afraid of looking like a fool sometimes. It's okay to look like a fool if you do it for a higher purpose. Yeah, that's kind of that's what matters in life. So don't be afraid to sometimes make mistakes, because that's the only path forward. If you take no risks in your life, you're never going to go very far. Few risks are always so important. So remember these things. One of the things that I discovered several years ago is that many of the words that are used for generosity in the suttas are words that are also used in the Third Noble Truth. The Third Noble Truth is about Nibbana. It's about the final ending of the sense of self. And so it means that the movement of the mind that you are encouraging by giving is basically the same movement of the mind that you have when you reach enlightenment. The same kind of freedom. It's just that one of them is far more profound, but the same kind of idea. That is how important generosity is, and this is why the Buddha encourages it so much on the path. So this is what generosity does to you, yeah? So you can see that already you are creating a kind of an island for yourself. You are building up spiritual qualities, yeah, already moving in the right direction. And obviously, you're also releasing the piece of meat, yeah? Because when you're giving, well, that is exactly what releasing the piece of meat is all about, yeah? You are giving something that you previously held on to. So that is the starting point. And then, of course, you have the ethics, the morality, the kindness of the Buddhist path. And the kindness of the Buddhist path is also very similar. Yeah? When you are kind to others, you're not thinking of yourself. You're letting go of your selfishness. You're not thinking what I can get of this. Your focus is on the world instead. Your focus is on other people. And of course, the weird thing is that if you do focus on other people, you want to make them happy. You want to do the right thing towards them. The person who benefits the most is yourself. It's just that you don't think about it. It just happens automatically. Yeah, this is kind of the weird thing about this. So again, you are letting go of the piece of meat because you're not thinking of yourself. It's a non-self action because you're not thinking of yourself. And then you actually reap that benefit, yeah, of finding that island within yourself, using the Dhamma as an island as a consequence. And then all of these things start to happen. Yeah, then eventually your meditation deepens because you are really fulfilling the path. And as I mentioned before, that is when you find that real refuge from the world within yourself as a consequence. And then all these factors start to come together. You feel in harmony with yourself. You feel at peace with yourself. And when your meditation comes together, you know that meditation depends on your external harmony. And because it depends on your external harmony, you become a force for good in the world, even more so than you did before, through generosity and through your morality. You understand that meditation only works if you live at peace with the world, you live at harmony in the world. And so you become this beautiful person. And sometimes we underestimate how much power we have as individuals. Remember the Buddha. The Buddha was one person, and the Buddha had immeasurable influence of the world for over 2,500 years. And we should all try to live a little bit more like the Buddha. And if each one of us can be like a little Buddha, if you wish, do a little bit of these things, we will have also contribute to the world in a similar way, on a much smaller scale, obviously, but in a similar way as the Buddha did. Every time you do an act of kindness, it's like you're throwing a rock in the water, and the rings spread out, touching people around you. And you know that. I know that. I know how people have touched me in my life through their kindness, through their generosity. This is how the world works. And we all become. This is how you create peace in the world, and also how you create peace within yourself. Anyway, that is all I have to say. My half an hour is up, so I have to stop now. So let's do some meditation together. Now the time has come for putting the theory into practice. Okay, everyone. So now finally we can settle down a little bit. And just to remind you, just very briefly, two of the main principles of meditation is, on the one hand, letting go, and on the other hand, the enjoyment of the meditation. And letting go initially is really about just relaxing and allowing things to be. And so if you are able to relax, you're actually letting go. because the non-relaxed state is a state of holding on. So just sitting back, just allowing the world to pass by without reacting, without getting involved, without allowing the thoughts to come, but not really sticking onto those thoughts, but allowing them to come, arise, and then disappear again. This is what this really is all about. Sitting back, just enjoying and just watching the show, if you like the famous simile of the passenger on the train. So always start off with that kind of letting go. Letting go often means something very different from what we think it means. It's simple. It's just really relaxing deeply. That is what, in a sense, it is about. And as you let go in this very simple fashion, just doing nothing basically, allowing things to be, then notice the peace of that. Even if there are thoughts going on in your mind, there's something peaceful and beautiful about not doing anything. It's as if your energy comes back into your mind. It's as if the clarity slowly returns and the mindfulness arises. And please be aware of that enjoyment of the meditation, the good qualities that are there, and how enjoyable it is to allow these good qualities to arise. The more you enjoy the meditation, the more easy it becomes to just be peaceful and just enjoy. And then as you let go, as you enjoy the process that is going on, then mindfulness will arise. And there comes a point when you kind of naturally follow the breath. The breath is just there. You don't need to look for it. You don't need to try. You don't need to hold on to it. The breath is a bit like the wind in the trees. something that is there. You are present, the breath is present, and you just observe it because it is there with you. No holding on, no trying, no striving, just enjoying the soft touch of the breath. And in this way, gradually allow things to deepen. Okay, everyone. So now please just spend a moment or two just to review your meditation today and ask yourself if you do feel more peaceful or at ease or mindful or whatever. Ask yourself why that is the case. What is this process of meditation? What does it mean to let go? And how do you develop your perceptions? Okay. So there you are. So now we can take some questions or comments or whatever. So please just fire away whatever you'd like to bring up. Please do so.
Ajahn, I have a question. Just now you mentioned about pure mindfulness. There's no such thing as pure mindfulness. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Okay, so what I mean is that mindfulness does not exist in a kind of vacuum. It does not exist just on its own. It exists as a kind of in a network of causes and conditions and also results. And so if we talk just about being mindful in daily life, we are missing out on a lot of how mindfulness actually is developed. So first of all, mindfulness has many different levels to it, many different stages. You can have like ordinary mindfulness, which is very, every day you're trying to be aware of what you're doing or whatever. Then you can have the meditation that you have, the mindfulness you can have in meditation that often can be more deep. And then you can have the mindfulness that arises out of deep meditation, maybe after samadhi and these kind of things. And so we need to understand mindfulness kind of in a more holistic, in a more complete way. And we need to understand all the factors that lead to that development of that mindfulness. And in a sense, this was what the last part of the talk was about. I was talking about generosity, I'm talking about sila, very, very briefly, but I did mention it there. And if you do those things well, that will actually lead to real mindfulness. And when you have real mindfulness, that will lead you to samadhi. And when you have real samadhi, that will actually lead you to the kind of insights the Buddha was talking about. And if you get some of those insights or you get some of that samadhi, well, that is what the Buddha really is on about when he's teaching the Dhamma. He's not talking about mindfulness, so much in daily life or just using it as a kind of daily thing to kind of balance yourself out. That is important as well, but it's only really a very preliminary step in the Buddhist practice, and then it goes much, much deeper than that. So all of the causes of mindfulness and the results of mindfulness is what is important. The purpose of mindfulness in the suttas is very different from the purpose of mindfulness that you see in the present world usually.
Ajahn, just now, I do understand you when you talk about, the conditional, it's all conditional in a sense. When you mention samadhi, I mean, if I achieve samadhi, and I come up from samadhi, I should continue to practice vipassana as much as possible during the daily life and reflect on the teaching of the Buddha. Is this the right way? Or I should not get so hung up with, I must get samadhi, but very much just continue with the practice, concentrate on the breathing, whether I get it or I don't get it. And after, I of course, after meditation, I come out in my daily life. Every single moment, I reflect on the teaching of the Buddha. Am I on the right path? Is it with me?
Yeah. No, it sounds to me like you're on the right path. You sound like you are. This is good. Yeah, you're reflecting on the teaching of the Buddha, bringing that with you. And you're right. Don't try too hard to kind of think I have to get samadhi, because this often becomes just a hindrance. It becomes more craving. Instead, enjoy the meditation. Samadhi is the outcome of the causes and conditions being right, and if the causes and conditions are right, then the samadhi will happen. But what is not a cause and condition of samadhi is wanting the samadhi too much. If you want it too much, then actually that becomes a hindrance very often. You have to want it a little bit, because you have to want it enough to come to the Armadale group. Yeah, if you don't come to the Armadale group, you're not going to get any samadhi, right? So you have to want to come to the Armadale group. You have to want to bring out your cushion and sit down on your bottom and kind of, so you have to. There has to be some initial desire to meditate, but the kind of this craving to achieve something on the path is always just going to be a hindrance. So put in the causes, and the causes, as you say quite rightly, they happen in daily life. They happen with how you interact with the people around you. They happen with, again, as you say, also reflecting on the Dhamma, because very often you may not know, well, what should I do now? And then you think, well, what does the Dhamma say? What does the Buddha say? What would Ajahn Brahmali say? Should I tell this person off, or should I just have compassion? Okay, maybe I just have compassion today. Yeah. So you ask yourself what the Dhamma is, right? And in this way, you use the Dhamma to kind of guide you during daily life, to kind of bring you in the right direction. And so, absolutely. So use the Dhamma, use the idea of right view to enable the kindness, to enable the compassion in the world. And as you develop this as much as you possibly can, meditation will improve, mindfulness will improve, samadhi will eventually just happen. And so, please carry on. I think you're doing the right thing. Yeah, great.
We have 3 hands up, so maybe if everybody just could ask their questions.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Please. I think. Yeah.
Hi, this is Martha.
Hi, Martha.
And I would like to ask about, I think you kind of actually answered it a little bit, but just a question, because when it comes to the Metta Sutta, I was conditioned to worry about what other people were thinking and to obsess to the point where I really gave up paying attention to my own senses so as not to be rude or impolite when someone comes in and gave me a kiss when I was real young, or a clean plate clubber, and then worrying about reputation as opposed to safety and health. So in the Metta Sutta, where it talks about let me not do the slightest thing that the wise will later reprove, I am wondering, and I think that you brought it up because you said don't be afraid to look a fool if you're being generous. But I don't know if you can talk more about letting go of other people's, and what is wise, although you just said, what would the Buddha do, what would Ajahn Brahmali do?
Right, anyway, I think it's very important not to be too concerned about what other people think, because very often that kind of concern actually leads us to doing stupid things. If we're too concerned about others, it means that sometimes to please others, you might do something which is actually wrong, something which is immoral. And this is the ultimate consequence of being too much of a people pleaser and these kind of things. So we should act from integrity. We should ask ourselves, what is right? What is the right thing to do? And if other people don't like that, actually it is their problem. It is not our problem. And sometimes those people who don't like that we live well, that we do the right thing, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing if we don't have them so much in our life anymore. Maybe that's a good thing anyway. So, and I think this is what happens kind of on the spiritual path, is that you tend to sometimes let go of your old friends because you realize they haven't got the quality or the character which is required to sustain that friendship anyway, and that's okay. Yeah, we shift our friends a little bit, and then you move towards friends who are more, who help you to practice a spiritual life, who kind of make it more conducive, make it more possible to do the right thing. So acting with integrity is critical. Always asking yourself what is right, and it doesn't matter what other people want. That's kind of irrelevant. It's what is right that is important. And even the Buddha says that, sometimes he gives a simile of a child that is choking on a piece of meat. And he says that, well, even if you have to draw blood, you might stick your hand or finger into the throat of that child to pull out the meat so the child survives. And so sometimes a little bit of pain may be necessary for people to learn, or for kind of move in the right way. Sometimes the Buddha could be a bit fierce with the monks. He could tell them off because they were doing stupid things like being noisy or being being too socializing. Absolutely. So ask yourself what is right from a Dhamma point of view, not what is right from people-pleasing point of view. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Very good. Great. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
Firstly, I have recently put on hold my studies so that I can focus my life on following the Dhamma. And one thing that I've found is that one of my teachers that I always look at is Ajahn Sujato, and he's mentioned that a wise way when you're learning Dhamma is rather than, for example, listening to multiple talks per day, just one teaching, slowly sit on that, absorb that, which is what I'm trying to do because I also think that it's, quality over quantity. However, what I'm finding is that the more that I get into my practice, I feel there is a conflict between listening to teachers who sort of say, see for yourself, just do your own practice and things will come to you, with the teachings to have very focused practice. So, focus on this part of your breath and then do this and then do this. And I'm a bit conflicted as to whether to have a more purposeful, pointed practice or to sort of just let things go, if that makes sense, and be.
Okay, so what matters is that you kind of follow the advice of the Buddha, that you follow what he said. That's what matters. So as long as it is in line with the Dhamma, you are kind of on the right path. There are certain things where you should have very clear focus. For example, when it comes to, when we talk about practice, we shouldn't kind of limit that word down to meditation practice. Practice means everything on the Noble Eightfold Path. So if you're talking about sila, if you're talking about morality, you should be very committed to that, very kind of super duper committed. You should be like every moment matters. Yeah, now matters. What am I thinking right now? Oh, wait, I'm thinking the wrong thing. Let me move back again. And so you should have a very strong commitment to the idea of kindness, including generosity and all of these kind of things. So it depends what you mean by that. When it comes to meditation practice, again, the idea is to understand the instructions of the Buddha as clearly as you can. And so let's take, for example, the idea of mindfulness of breathing. The way that is described in the suttas is that first you establish mindfulness, then you watch the breath. And so very often what happens in real life is that people try to use the breath so as to establish mindfulness. And this is why the translation of Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, is very problematic because it gives the idea that you use meditation to establish mindfulness, when actually what the sutta says is that you establish mindfulness first, then you use that mindfulness that you have to enable you to follow the meditation object. So if you understand the sequence of things, I think a lot of the confusion will go away. So when you meditate, the idea is, well, how do I establish mindfulness? If you go straight to the tip of your nose, you're going to go crazy because you're going to have to hold on to it and your mind is going to go off and it's not really going to work. But if you understand that, okay, establish mindfulness first, sit back, enjoy the peace, what is happening, have the right kind of values, the value of enjoying peace, of enjoying tranquility, not the value of enjoying thinking about the world. The world is out of control anyway. What's the point of thinking about the world? Let the world go. So the right values combined with the enjoyment of the peace, combined with the ethics that you bring to the meditation, all of these things will congeal and then allow mindfulness to arise as a consequence. So, and then when the mindfulness is sufficiently strong, as you kind of allow the world to fade, you feel that you are reasonably well present, then it's almost as if the breath emerges by itself. It's easy to watch the breath. It's pleasant to watch the breath. You're just sitting there and it's like you're watching the sunset or you're watching the wind in the trees or something like that. The breath is just another object in the world. There's no sense of having to hold on to it or grasp onto it or any of these things. The moment you start grasping onto the breath, it becomes kind of unpleasant. It becomes a bit forced. You can't really enjoy the meditation anymore. And if you don't enjoy the meditation, you're on the wrong path because you won't be able to sustain something that you don't enjoy here. So it's about this, getting the kind of the sequence right. And then the whole dilemma will resolve itself automatically by whether you should focus or not focus or relax or not, because it's about doing the right time, everything at the right time. And when the mindfulness is there, well, then the focus will come by itself. So something like that is what I would reply here. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. And my second question is about recently I was in a temporary seminary program here in Indonesia.
Yeah.
And during that time, we just constant walking meditation, sitting meditation, tea meditation throughout the days.
Yeah.
And the advisor mentioned that when let's say we were walking and instead of the focus on our feet, we got lost in thoughts, we'd sort of stop, but they mentioned to just label it as thinking, not focus too much on the content of the thoughts, but the fact that there was thinking. And they stated very clearly that they didn't want us to be judging the thoughts and investigating it because that content can often be quite worldly. Now, coming back to my own practice, I've found sometimes maybe I'll do eating meditation and I'll notice, oh, okay, I've got a thought, but I tend to go, oh, that's rooted in greed, for example. Now, I wanted to ask whether that would be more helpful, because I'm thinking that if I can notice that, then I might be able to take more purposeful, positive actions to sort of combat the negative roots.
Yeah.
Or is it better to just be like thinking?
Okay, so it depends on the context. So if you are meditating, you're watching the breath and you are quite peaceful, then it's best just to be aware and not look at the content, just aware of the thought, because the moment you look at the content, you're going to get sidetracked from the meditation. So within meditation, just be aware of the thought and let it go as quickly as you can. However, in daily life, if you are doing things and you're trying to have right effort, then you do what you are suggesting now, which is actually understanding the content, understanding why am I getting upset about something, why am I feeling greedy about something. And if you understand that, you can take a countermeasure to overcome those things. And that second part is also very important, because if you do use right view to overcome the defilements of the mind, actually in the longer run, these thoughts will become less and less and less, because you're using right view to see the world afresh, to see the world in the way the Buddha saw the world. And as you strengthen that right view over time, it becomes clearer and clearer. The thoughts also become less of a problem over time. So again, context is what is the most important here. Yeah. Very good.
Ajahn Brahmali. Hi.
Hi, John. Yeah.
Hi. Just coming back to the Bhikkhu Bodhi's keynote speech.
Yeah.
11 years ago, I think Ajahn Brahm went to Vietnam to give his paper on gender equality. And unfortunately, he didn't get to give it. So does that mean that there has been at least some movement among Buddhists towards social, equality and injustices being, women equality being improved, and or is that still a big issue despite at least Bhikkhu Bodhi giving his paper? The second point is, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi was quite critical about Buddhist been quite silent about all the, the violence around the world, etc. So even though we don't want to be attached to the world, as Buddhists, practicing Buddhists, it doesn't mean we don't take a stand and follow the Eightfold Path and right effort, right view. And that comes back to sila and a good solid meditation practice. I just wanted your comments on that because we're running out of time.
Yeah, sure. No, of course. Happy to comment on anything really. But so is there a movement? There's definitely a movement happening in the world in terms of women's ordination. That's really changing dramatically. There's so many bhikkhunis now, nuns around in Sri Lanka, in Thailand. It's happening here. And the fact, as you say, that he was allowed to give that speech in that kind of gathering, because everyone knew what he was going to say beforehand, he was given approval to give that particular talk, means that there is there's something is happening here. So that's on the one side. On the other side, I spoke to one of the Burmese monks who was there afterwards, and he said he's also very pro-bhikkhunis, which is actually very rare in Burma. So that was kind of, wow, this Burmese monk who's pro-bhikkhunis. That was kind of very interesting. And he said to me that at least the young monks here, for them it is very good to hear a talk like this because the young monks, they see the world differently. And so they will then be conditioned in a different way to kind of become more accepting of this. For the old ones, usually you're so stuck in your ways when you're kind of past a certain age that you can't really change, right? It's like Ajahn Brahmali says that science advances one funeral at a time. That's kind of one of his sayings. And I think sometimes kind of bhikkhuni ordination might be a little bit like that, one funeral at a time we advance. But yes, no, I think it's a positive sign, and things are changing. And the monk who excluded Ajahn Brahm at that time, he was there in the hall and he approved Bhikkhu Bodhi's speech. That's kind of a good sign, So on the other thing about talking about issues in the world and about the inequalities in the world, yes, we should do things. We should do what is right, and we should speak out against injustice, and we should act against it. Maybe more important to act against injustice than speaking out. Too many people speak, not enough people actually do things. And I think that's a kind of very important point that we often forget. But I think the point is that there is a tendency to get too involved with the world, that you're so involved that when you realize that your actions don't actually have any effect anyway, and sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, you never know what's going to happen, you get really disappointed. And when you get really disappointed, you feel sad, and maybe you get angry, because anger is also very closely under the surface there. So you need to understand that the world is conditioned by so many things. You have no idea what's going to happen in the world. Yes, you do your best. Maybe it has a tiny effect. Maybe it has no effect. Maybe the world is going to go in a different direction regardless of what happens. Understanding the idea of anicca, of uncertainty, of unreliability, of everything being out of control, if you understand that deeply, you're not attached to the outcome. And that is the important thing here. Because if you're not attached to the outcome, you can come back to your meditation, you can close your eyes, and you can be peaceful in your meditation, even though the whole world is kind of being blown up. Because, that's the nature of the world. Sometimes it blows up. Sometimes you have wars. Sometimes all kind of things going on. And that is kind of the thing here. So you try to balance these things. So you do the right thing because you are a moral person, and you know that morality is a factor of the path, and because it's good to be kind in the world. And then you are doing it in the right way.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think, Bhikkhu Bodhi is an excellent example because he actually wrote a letter of testimony for Mohsen Mahdawi, the Palestinian student in Columbia University, who was detained by ICE. And a lot of people don't know, even though he's Palestinian, he's actually a Buddhist.
Yeah.
So, it shows, and he was doing a peaceful protest. So I think at least Bhikkhu Bodhi is, walking the talk in a way. And I think he was a little critical that a lot of Buddhists were pretty much standing by the side. And I understand what you're saying. we shouldn't get too attached to the outcome, but we should still try to fight social injustice.
Yeah. I think that just very briefly, personally, I think that the most important kind of morality is the morality with our near relations, with people who are close to us, because that affects us very, very powerfully. If you have a good relationship with your family, with your work colleagues, with your spiritual community, that is the most powerful kind of morality, because it affects you very, very badly if those things are bad. Yes, we should also do things in the larger world, but that affects us less in a sense. And so that is a secondary thing. So it's also kind of a slight hierarchy there, I would say. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
We've come to the end of the evening tonight.
Yeah.
Andrew, did you have a super quick question or comment?
Yes, I'm a bit lost in a sense, because according to Satipatthana Sutta, we need to concentrate on the breathing first. So I need to unlearn what I have learned.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
Let me just briefly comment on that, Catherine, because so remember that the mindfulness is a matter of degrees. So you have to be mindful in daily life, but it's kind of a preliminary. So it's always a matter of degrees. So you start off with a bit of mindfulness, and then you live better as a consequence. The mindfulness increases, and so it's not entirely kind of black and white. You have to feel your way a little bit through this. When is the mindfulness strong enough to meditate, etc., etc.? And as you do that, it kind of becomes more clear, I think. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming together and supporting each other, all of us in our practice. And many, many thanks to Ajahn Brahmali for your generosity. A great example of walking the talk in coming and teaching us tonight. So it was terrific to hear what you said, and thank you for your time, and to everybody. And we look forward to coming together again next week.
Before we stop, Catherine, we have to pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Is that okay?
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Great. Yeah. Sadhu. So we'll just Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Okay. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. Bye-bye.